All right. Welcome to the lounge. I'm Matt with Voltner Woodworking and your host of the Maker Lounge podcast, where we have a rotating group of makers hanging out and talking shop with each other. This maker has more lasers, sanders, and CNCs than I have brown hair left in my beard, and he keeps them busy with a variety of awesome projects under his business, handcrafted by Trey. Trey is back to co-host in the lounge, and he will not be co-hosting alone because that would just be hosting. To join him in this co-hosting opportunity is another co-host we've had on the show. This guy tinkers so much, Tinkerbell has filed for unemployment from from stamp making to CNCs and metalwork. His curiosity for the arts has given him a great and diverse portfolio. Welcome back, Dean Duplantis, to the lounge.
And apologies to Tinkerbell.
Wait, what? Two co-hosts? What is this? The View?
God. Your dad jokes know no bounds.
People love these dad jokes.
They're so good.
Well, we've decided to flip the script this week and give them full control of that bell. Insert bell. Because these guys are going to be the ones taking the questions. And as we do a recap episode of the previous 20 episodes of the podcast. So, Trey and Dean, take it away.
So the very first thing going through the episodes that I want to ask you is, where do you come up with these intros?
Yeah. You know, I laugh. I'm sitting there writing these sometimes while I'm sitting on the couch, and my wife will just look over at me like, what are you doing? And I'm just giggling. And what's funny is we, when I read them, I watch your guys' reaction. I watch the guest's reaction. And then it starts tickling me. My wife thinks that I'm laughing at myself, which I kind of am. But I'm watching the reactions. Like I had Derek on last week, and watching him just snicker. Like he couldn't even put his head up. He just was snickering because he knew the intro was coming. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I try to like wrap up, the guest in a couple sentences. And that's not something, as you know, Trey, you were on the first few episodes. I just hit record and we just started talking. Yeah. And my wife was like, she listened to the first couple episodes and she was like, you just kind of didn't do an intro. You were just kind of like hit the ground running. And I was like, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. Like,
well, I mean, you still had the music or the intro music. We just didn't do much of a intro write-up, but they've come so far in that alone.
Yeah. Some of the I have some of the clips of some of the intros. I asked the Patreon members, what are your best moments and stuff of the episodes so far, and I think the intros have been pretty fun for them. And I was like, well, do you guys tune out after the intro, or
I'll tell you, as a listener, what I like about the intro is it shows to me that you're prepared.
Yeah.
Like, you've looked into your guests more than just superficially, and you're prepared. So the more nuanced or surprised the guest is at the intro, it reminds me of, there's this guy, Nardwar, he interviews rappers, and he always knows like these facts that they're like, how do you know that? And so when you say things that really get the guest, I'm like, okay, so Matt's well-versed and he's looked into this person a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we first started the podcast. My goal was to have one recording a month, and I was like, well, I don't have time to, necessarily do a podcast. And eventually other things just started taking the wayside, and the podcast took its place. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to record, like we did with both of you guys. So Trey, you were episodes 1 through 3. Dean, you were episodes 4 through 6. And we recorded those in kind of like one sitting. Well, Dean, yours was 2 sittings. But that was kind of the ultimate goal. And then I found out that I didn't have time to react to the feedback from one episode to the next, because people would make comments and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you like that? Okay, well, then I can adjust the next episode for that. And then one thing that came up was the intros. And somebody's like, oh, I like the intros. So I realized that doing them in bulk, I wouldn't have had the chance to do an intro that would catch the guest off, or be fun because you're in the middle of recording, or you're recording all the intros kind of at the end, and it would lose its flavor a little bit. One of the episodes that the Patreon members liked was this one. She's an ex-cardiac nurse, now small business owner, but her days of working on hearts isn't over because she has captured the hearts of makers all over the world. I'm talking about the one and only Christy with Oak Hill Millworks. And in Christy's words, this guy likes ducks, not getting haircuts, and is always fixin' to do something. I agree with all of that because this duck loving maker always keeps us on our toes trying to figure out what he's going to make next. And he's giving your nasty looks. Nick with Stated Woods Co. is here. Yeah.
That was a good intro. And so how did you know about the ducks?
Well, so one thing I started doing in when I'm scheduling is I started having using an app called Calendly. So when I get ready to have a guest on, there's a series of questions that I have them fill out. And I also do a little pre-check I put in there. Give me some information. What do you want to talk about in the episode? And so actually on that one, Christy filled it out for Nick. So she put in there about the ducks. But I've also followed Nick for some time and knew that he had, he puts on his stories and stuff about the ducks. But yeah, it was that was pretty funny to catch Nick off guard with that one because he wasn't expecting that. Christy, of course, she knew because she was the one that wrote it.
And so I guess part of the reason for this episode is Trey and I were early guests or co-hosts on this podcast, and so we're supposed to talk about growth. I don't remember filling out a sheet like that, an intro sheet, Trey.
No, not at all.
No.
So how far into your journey did you incorporate that?
So about, I want to say probably 7 or 8 episodes ago, when I started to kind of, I think I was getting ready for January, and I was like, okay, what's the new year going to look like for guests? And then I had talked to quite a few different guests, and I was like, how am I going to manage all this through Messenger? And people's lives are busy. I had guys like Jimmy who was coming on, and Jimmy told me in the message, he's like, you have to remind me 20 times. And so he's like, I will forget, or I'll get distracted or whatever. He's like, remind me 20 times. So in like a couple weeks time period, I'd send him like settle hands or whatever. And finally I texted him and I said, hey, just want to make sure we're on for today, because I hadn't heard back for a couple days. He's like, yeah, we're on. So the Calendly app actually puts it on their calendar and it puts it on my calendar. And then I send them, it gives me their email and all that kind of stuff, which is great. And then I sent out the link to them for the stream through that. So it was more of a thing that I had to do because managing who was coming up and everything was becoming too much of a burden, because I did not plan to do these every week.
Now let's back up and let's not get too personal. You can edit this out if not. But you texted me that same day, like 2 hours before, and said, he's not responding. I don't know what I'm going to do. He's not responding.
Yeah. I was like, I might need a fill-in or whatever. Yeah. I was getting kind of nervous, And then there's others who I've messaged, and I'm like, hey, just, looking forward to tonight. They're like, I didn't forget. I'm like, I didn't say you were, just, that's cool. But yeah, I mean, everybody's got different schedules. There's different personalities, different, some people do this full time, and actually if you do it full time, you're less inclined to be available on a Friday night or a Sunday night for something like this. It's usually people who don't do this full time who are like, yeah, I'll jump on Friday night. Sure. No problem.
So why, I always liked the fact that you were doing a bulk recording and releasing multiple episodes like you did with ours. What was the prompt to make it shorter, make it more frequent?
Well, I had quite a few people who I had been talking to about getting on the show. And so then I was like, well, how am I going to, these personalities don't fit together, so I can't put them all together. And I really want to showcase, this person or that person. I'm trying to remember who my first individual guest was. It might be Izzy. I was going to have Izzy on, and I started to kind of like, I really wanted to just focus on Izzy, and I didn't feel like I could put other people in the episode with him.
Sure.
And after that, I started to go, this was fun. Like, just to kind of have a one-on-one conversation. But I didn't want the podcast to only be that. Like, I still want to sprinkle in, like I had Scott and Suman on for a holiday wrap-up episode, and those guys were great. I mean, it was so funny, that episode. If you haven't listened to that episode, you go back and listen to that one. It was a lot of fun. So it's fun to mix it up and just have different guests, and sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's something like this. Today we're having a holiday feast, and John with Lincoln Street Woodworking was supposed to bring the food, but he's walking uphill in the snow both ways.
And I'm hungry.
Yeah, where's my food, dang it? Suman brought his holiday chia pet, and Scott has the the clapper. And that is how you know it is the sign Christmas is here.
If you think about it, back in the day, that would like literally turn somebody's lights off. Now it's like, hey Alexa, turn the light off.
Yeah, that's right. Clapper was the first, and I can't say it because
Alexa.
then my podcast might shut off.
Don't do that.
So you will continue to maybe do both.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite episodes that you did with two co-hosts were, I think it was 9 and 10, if I'm looking right. But you did Dave Mao, and then you did Tyler. And it was, one of them truly acted as a co-host, and y'all interviewed Dave.
Yeah.
And then they swapped. And I was like, oh, how interesting, because I did listen to those back to back. And to have them like get up and switch seats, basically, was a really neat. You don't hear that on a lot of podcasts. And I think, everybody has a podcast, it feels like. I think all of us have podcasts, right?
Yeah.
So to find ways to make yourself different or special, I think is part of the charm. So don't take the easy way out and do it like everybody else. I think still bring in the mashup, still do the hangout for sure.
Yeah. One guest so I had Jason Bent on, and he talked about Sedge a lot. For those people who aren't familiar, Jason Bent is he basically moved up near Festool, so that way he could be close to Festool headquarters and eventually do an internship up there. And his conversation was really interesting. And the name Sedge kept coming up. Anybody who knows Festool Sedge. And I was like, I need to get him on. And I said, Jason, would you come on as a co-host? So that's something that I'm trying to get lined up. I think that's really fun, because especially once somebody's been a guest on the show, then they're comfortable enough. Like both of you guys are comfortable enough coming back and doing that. So the episode with Tyler, Trey was the co-host on that one. No, you were the co-host with
So me and
Dave.
Rod and then Dave, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think Dave came back on as a co-host for Tyler's episode.
So that's also something that I found pretty neat, is like I didn't know Rod from anything, and obviously that was our first episode, your first episode, but now we're good friends, because of it, and we didn't know each other, but our conversation still rolled. Same, I've known Dave forever, but when Dave and I got on there, it was that's what I kind of like about the Maker Lounge style.
Yeah. Well, that episode when I had 3D Dave on, that I'm going to play the intro to that episode right here. Which brings me to our guest for today. I'm talking about the man who puts the big D in 3D. Mr. 3D Dave himself is joining us and talking about 3D printing.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm like, which D is it? Which D are we talking about?
So that was a lot of fun. That's actually when I started to do the intros. I started to kind of find my vibe, It was like, the big D, 3D Dave. And people really loved that. And they started, started picking up on the intros. And so now it became kind of like an expected type of thing.
Well, speaking of the big D, I mean, what's been the neatest thing you found out about somebody while researching for these intros, or maybe something they shared about themselves you picked up through the intro?
Through the intro, I would say reading about Jimmy's past, because I think everybody, sees Jimmy and they just know that Jimmy's always been Jimmy. But when I started researching, not a lot of people have an IMDb, a Google, a Wikipedia. So you could really find out, things if you start digging. But reading about Jimmy, and I was like, oh, his brother. Okay. So then I started reading about, I had forgotten that his brother was in show business, and, so that connection and how he got involved and all that kind of stuff, really kind of helped drive that conversation. And so the intro actually set up the conversation. And so that's another thing, that if there's something that I really want to talk about, I didn't want the episode with Jimmy to be the same as the other episodes with Jimmy on other podcasts, because they all talk about making fun, which we did talk about that show. But I really wanted to talk about like his beginnings. He was, in toy making and things like that. And so I think, just kind of learning more about him made me like him even more.
That alone is just impressive, his backstory. I mean, we all know the basis of it, but being able to dig into what not every... You went deeper into it than a lot of people would hand him the reins and just let him talk about what he, does now, kind of thing. So
yeah. That was fun.
And I think that's something you've developed over, 19 episodes. If I can say, I think you were very gun shy when we recorded.
Oh, very.
I think you had trouble controlling what was going on in the room.
Yeah.
And, maybe we went off a little deep sometimes. But I found as the episodes have gone on, you've actually gotten more active. What's that process and growth been like for you, learning how to control the conversation a little better?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really helped me is sitting on my left-hand side here is I've got my iPad. And so I've got, a list of questions. I over-prepare for the conversations. And I think it's best to over-prepare. And when I first started doing this, it kind of bit me because the episodes would go super long, because I'm like, I've got a list of questions. I'm kind of a type A person where I'm like, I have my list of questions and I got to check them all off. But then I would say over the last 3 or 4 episodes, there's just a point where you're like, okay, the listener is going to probably stop listening. We've recorded for about an hour. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. I've got a list of questions. If I can, I'll get to it in the after show. But some conversations we didn't talk about things that I really wanted to talk about, and it's okay. And especially if it leaves a little bit of mystery or something, then you have them back on maybe at some point. There are, like we talked about, just leave a little bit to the, a little bit of intrigue, so people can go check you out.
And so under your list of questions, do you have a list of dad jokes you're going to work into the episode?
That's actually somebody asked me. They said, I noticed that there are some jokes you sprinkle in there, and I'll be honest with you, the ones that are in the mid-roll episode, those aren't prepared. The ones that are in the intro, I'm very prepared for, but sometimes the inspiration comes and you just I'm like, well, I edit this thing, so if I didn't like how it played out, I can always tune it out. Here's a clip from episode 7 with Brendan from the All-American Maker episode.
Obviously, I'm a dude.
Right.
So I resonate with dude stuff, but I've actually had a lot of women ask, like, hey, where's the woman woodworker or the woman leather worker, so on and so forth. So I think that's definitely coming because I want the brand to represent everybody, not just like a narrow field of people.
Right. Yeah. They all have to have beards, though, so I think that's you're gonna have to
the bearded lady.
The bearded lady. I think you need to make that, incorporate that.
Well, while we're talking about things you've changed over time, what are maybe some moments in episodes that led to changes in your podcast? Watershed moments that this happened a certain way and I either like that and I want to perpetuate that, or I didn't like the direction that was heading, so let me put in some checks to make sure we don't go down that road again.
Yeah. I think having the game prepared ahead of time really helps if the conversation is going a route that I don't want it to go, or I can tell it's going to be a super deep type of thing that maybe the listener's going to tune out on. Sometimes that's when I say, hey, we've got a game here, and so we'll play the game. And so now I'm divulging all the secrets. So now if you're a guest on the show and I throw like, hey, let's throw the game out there, you're going to be like, wait a minute. And sometimes it's also a cutoff point, right? Like if you've been recording for 50 minutes and you still have maybe 4 or 5 things you want to ask, you can always throw the game out there. If the game bombs, you can go back to the questions, right? But if the game takes off and it's great, that's a perfect way to end the episode. And so I've shifted. I hold the game back now, and then I use it as kind of an interjection point. And if I like how the game ended, that will be the end of the episode. Or if there's like, poor Christy and Nick, when I did the episode with them, we played a game called the Scott Suman game. We dubbed this game the Scott Suman game.
The Scott Suman game. Scott Suman.
And you have to say it all as one word. And that's literally how I have it typed. So in the Scott Suman game, was obviously when Scott and Suman were on, and I hadn't named the game yet. So I had Nick and Christy on to do that. Well, I threw them some zingers. Like they were tough questions. Like I wouldn't even been able to answer them. So as I'm asking the questions, I'm going like, oh, man, these poor guys, they're going to hate me for these questions, you know? And so like after that one, I was like, okay, let me ask a few more questions following the game. Like I wouldn't want to end the episode on something like that, you know? They did fantastic, you know, obviously kind of answer the questions, but so that was kind of something where I'm like, okay, I need to frame up the game in a way that it's not going to be like super difficult. It could just be more fun.
So what's your favorite game? I know we played the yes no game and a few others. So what's been your favorite game or introduction?
Yeah, the yes or no game, that was one that, you know, we played with Pete and Rod and you in the first few episodes, and that one is kind of, obviously it's the first few episodes, so that one kind of stuck through. But then I was like, well, when I had one-on-one guests, I was like, well, I can't play a yes or no game because it's just kind of like I'm just asking them the same questions, you know, like. So I was like, let me throw out rapid fire. And so rapid fire is probably my favorite because, kind of going back to my list, if I've got some questions that I want quick answers to, and just to satisfy my curiosity or just be something interesting. Like I asked Derek, you know, hey, do you play an instrument? And you know, so that was interesting. And then he took the conversation somewhere. So it's a way for me to kind of ask a broad sense of, you know, broad questions and just get kind of the feel for the person.
Nice. I do. Rapid fire is always a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do like the game that you add in there, and I like how the game has grown and gotten more organized for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there new segments on the horizon that you're going to work in, kind of like how you have the game and you've got the intro? Do you have other little things you're thinking about working in future episodes?
So it's difficult because I want to keep the game because that's kind of something that people have come to expect, and you know, I think people enjoy it and they don't know which game it's going to be or whatever. So there's another, like, I guess it's like Price is Right. You know, when you get called up to the stage, you're like, okay, what game am I going to play? You know, and then they reveal the game and you're like, oh, okay, that's the game I'm going to play. So that's the kind of approach that I'm taking with it is, I don't give anybody any forewarning on what the game's going to be kind of until we do it. And so there's a little bit of mystery there, I think. If you're listening to the episode, you're like, okay, I know, you know, Matt's going to play a game at some point. What game is going to be? And so, you know, hopefully people are enjoying that. As far as what's coming in the horizon, it's hard to, I want to keep that segment, but usually the guests have been phenomenal. They just have blown me away. And we've been talking for, you know, an hour, and then we're just now playing the game. And I'm like, what else can I squeeze into this? You know? So I've been debating some different approaches. But like you mentioned earlier, I think having a co-host, coming back regularly spices it up. And so that's something I'm looking to kind of bring back and do that.
Let's talk about past guests. I know we kind of hit on that a little bit. You talked about doing the individual thing as well as having two co-hosts, but how about like when you had the Sawdust Nation, how they have their own podcast and you brought all of them back on?
Yeah.
Now you have switched the script on them. Mm-hmm. How did that go in your mind?
Yeah, that was it was interesting because it was they obviously have their own flavor for their podcast, and I have my own flavor for my podcast, and I didn't necessarily want a podcast takeover, and but I did want, I wanted to have it in my own voice, my own flavor. So I think there is an inherent risk to doing something where there is that. The same with Scott and Suman. So Scott, Suman, and John, they're great friends, and that's actually why I wanted them on the podcast. John was supposed to be there, but he had a power outage, and so I wanted to kind of make it feel like I was walking up to them in the lounge, like if we were at WorkbenchCon and they were having a conversation, and I wanted it to be like me asking them a bunch of questions. That's the kind of vibe that I want to get for the podcast. So, and I have to keep reminding myself of that kind of mission statement. That's why I called it the Maker Lounge. I wanted it to feel like if you just come out of WorkbenchCon and everybody's hanging out around a table and just having a conversation. That's the feel that I want to go for. So yeah, sometimes the one-on-one conversations don't feel like that. It does feel like more of an interview. So you lose a little bit of that lounge kind of, loose conversation feel. And then even what we're doing here is it's more interview style, right? Like you guys are interviewing me, and because I put you guys in that position. But it's more interviewee instead of conversational, which is, it's okay to mix that up every once in a while, as long as it's not like every podcast is that same way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Not to inject my own podcast, but if you want to have a round table, that was something that we try to stick to a guest interview.
Yeah.
Because after 100 episodes, how much more Matt Voltner is there to be discovered?
Right.
So we try. It's hard. I love to talk. I love to hear myself talk. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to stay reined in and not dominate, especially when you have a guest that's quieter or more reserved.
Yeah.
So it's neat to hear you say that you're actively trying to do that, but at the same time, manage your own personal content to where it stays fresh every week.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how you play that out over the next 20 episodes.
Yeah. So actually, I guess I didn't set this up very well. But this goes back to, hey, I told you guys you were running the show, right? So I didn't plan a lot. But Dean, the reason why I specifically wanted you as one of the co-hosts today is because you said in, I think it was episode 4 or 5, you said, get 20 episodes under your belt and then do a, just think about, is this something that you want to continue doing? Right. I'm paraphrasing what you said. So,
yeah.
Here I am. This is episode 22, and we were trying to, get this one scheduled in, but we had some stuff, some conflicts. But me just trying to look back on the 20 episodes. You initially told me, hey, look, don't buy a new mic. Well, you see, I'm talking in a new mic.
Yeah, you've got a new mic. You've got a fancy background. You've got sound effects. You've got patrons.
He's got this
you've
glow.
Got
this big old beautiful glow in that beard.
Yeah. He's turned the resolution on our cameras down. His is 4K.
So, actually, one thing I normally have is I have this up over here, so that's really get the glow that way. Mm-hmm. For those of you watching on YouTube or on Spotify, we have the video available there as well.
And for those of you watching on YouTube or Spotify, the Super Bowl has 8 seconds left. So if you see me looking off screen, I'm just trying to see what's going on. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Wow. It's a clincher, I guess, huh?
I was tied with 20 seconds to go, so they just Not to give it away if you guys aren't watching, but they just got a field goal. The Chiefs did.
Wow, that's crazy.
So yeah, the 20 episode mark, that was something that Vincent Ferrari, who has had several podcasts in this, maker realm.
Yeah.
Right now he has another one that he just started up not too long ago, Digitally Creative. But Vincent always told us whenever we were starting that if you can get to 20, you can get to 100. But you have to get to 20. And a lot of people either, like you're saying, the weekly, having to do this every week burns you out. And then you spend all this money on equipment and stuff. And so, yeah, that's what I thought it was a good milestone. I mean, there's still days, we're lucky, we have 3 of us. So on the days where I'm just like, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, it's just too much work.
Right.
Austin or Christy pull me back in, and we do the same. Austin's like, I can't do this, and oh, come on, man, we've got patrons, they're depending on us.
Yeah.
Somebody's in their shop right now wanting to hear us. So yeah, you've made it to 20, so there's no reason you're only stopping yourself.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see what the workload does to you, because you are putting in a ton of work. What's the change in workload been like for you?
So I'm going to leave a little bit of teaser just to make sure that people stick around to the end of the episode. Or maybe it will be slightly before the end, so you don't just fast forward to the end. You'll never know. I might just throw it in there, and then you'll have missed it. How sad would that be? Yeah, the workload. So I think I'm experiencing a little bit of what you went through, Dean, when you started up the podcast. You started up the podcast. You had been posting on Instagram fairly regularly, and then you started doing the podcast, and then it was like, "Where's Dean?" It's like Dean disappeared. There were your last post was like June or something, and it was like December. It went quite some time.
Yeah, what I was making was a podcast.
Right, exactly. So this has been a pretty good focus for me. And also I have shifted my focus slightly away from Instagram because I'm
to TikTok, right?
Yeah. I'm dancing in bikinis on TikTok. So if you want
subscribe.
Yeah, if you want to check that out.
You have to do it now. I mean, there's just no way out of it.
Yeah. I'm going to get JB to do it for me. Justin Byers. A redneck in a bikini. That would be fun. So, and I can say that because he says he's redneck. So don't send me messages about I can't say somebody's a redneck because he claims it. So yeah, it's been a workload shift for me. I'm kind of frustrated at Instagram a little bit, just because it's forced me to. I've noticed that I've had a lack of creativity because I started getting into this rut of I need to post every day. And you could post every day and you could post crap every day. And a lot of people do. And you can tell, right? There's people just phoning it in for the algorithm. And, I'll admit early on, even when I started this podcast, I was like, yep, you should post every day because that's how you get discovered. But what happens when you get discovered? Like, okay, sure, you can get brand sponsorships and things like that. That is awesome. But if you're sacrificing your creativity, then you just have to kind of like weigh it. So I kind of got into this. I've got a full-time job, which that's my number one priority, family aside, of course. That's my number one priority. But then I have, Instagram, and I've got the podcast, and I'm trying to get my YouTube going. So how do I balance all? Well, something has to give at some point. So much like you, I think, Dean, I was like, well, I think I need to lay something down. And it was Instagram. So I hadn't posted for a couple weeks over there on Instagram. Trey and I had conversations about this. I just felt like I couldn't, I didn't want to just post me squeezing out glue, right?
Yeah.
That's what people are doing, or scraping glue off their workbenches, or whatever. Now, there's fun things like you do as like a group, a community. Like the pencil sharpening thing was pretty fun to see all the different things that people were doing, different ways to sharpen a pencil. But some people are just posting to just a post, to get discovered. So I was like, okay, what is one thing that is hurting me as a creator? And it was Instagram. So I stopped doing that. And I really just started focusing on the podcast, because I feel like this format gives me a chance to talk with other creators and get the information that I would otherwise have gotten on Instagram a few years ago. People used to do build videos. Things were very inspirational. I've now gone on to YouTube, and I'm binge watching YouTube. And all of that is like studying. I can't study on Instagram anymore. And Instagram has now become TikTok to me, which is just a time filler, a toilet watch, session kind of thing. And so I will be doing more Instagram stuff. I have brand sponsorships that I got to keep up with. So, I'll be doing that, but it's going to be things that I'm doing intentionally, and not just to do a post for a day.
So you personally, do you find this more rewarding than the Instagram side of things? Like, you're getting to meet the people on a personal level that you're interviewing, or
Right.
not interviewing as we've talked about, but is this more rewarding to you overall?
100%. I would say that now my perspective might be different than his, but I had Derek on last week, and since then we've been texting and just like having conversation that we wouldn't have had otherwise, right? And Derek is a phenomenal person. If anybody has a chance to meet him, he's the kindest person. And you wouldn't get that on Instagram. Like you could reach out and send a DM or something like that, but you're never going to have that connection. So it's the same thing as like the reason why people love going to Workbench Con and IWF and all these different events, even maker meetups, is to make that personal connection. And Instagram it's just a screen, and you don't really get to, like in here, so I edit out some of the flubs and things like that, right? Just to make for a better listening experience. But, some of it is just raw, they're not all fun, jokey conversations. Some of them are dry, but meaningful. And like Chris Zepp was so inspirational. If you listen to that episode, the guy can talk, by the way. he can go on, and we almost went. I don't know how long that episode ended up being, but I trimmed out quite a bit. And just to listen to somebody like that, and just the passion, you can pick it up on like watching YouTube, but you can't. It's hard to pick that up on Instagram because you got 60 seconds to make a mark. And so yeah, definitely, I'm all about the podcast. It's a great way to. And I subscribe to other podcasts, like listening to yours, Dean, and how you guys interview the guests and things like that. There have been people I've followed because I listened to those episodes. And, it's kind of my goal is to get exposure to different people. So do I always want A-listers on the podcast? No, I want people who are going to be
us. You want people like
people like you guys. Yeah.
It's just this pretty face. I know it.
I just invited you guys for your looks.
No, it's interesting to hear you say that, Matt. I think kind of the same way when Instagram moved away from still shots, beauty shots, project finish type shots into reels. It's slowly more from, I was trying to do a 60-second, whatever the max was. Because this is my project. And then I realized that's not what is getting traction. What gets traction is me scraping glue in a bikini. And I'm just talking about being funny.
Yeah,
fat guy in a bikini.
I want to see that now.
Thing, yeah, right. And then I start noticing my reels are 20 seconds and 13 seconds, and I'm like, what is the fucking point of this? Excuse my language, but I spent an hour on the sofa editing a 13-second clip. And I tell you what else, the podcast, right? I feel like it's an open conversation, and so things can't be misconstrued. And I'm terrified of something I post on Instagram today, 5 years from now, is controversial for some reason, and it harms me. And so I really dial back who I am on Instagram because I'm gonna have a public page. I don't want to put something out there that is public and can hurt me later on. And so I don't feel the same way in the podcast because it's conversational. It's between me and you. We have listeners, but this conversation is between you and I. So I do feel kind of the same way. That's why I shifted more to the podcast.
What's interesting is you have a bunch of, and I've said this in other episodes, you have a bunch of introverts getting together and talking to each other. Because I think makers in general are introverts. They're people who like to work in their garage alone, typically. Even if you watch, Four Eyes, him and Sean Boyd, they're in the shop together, but they're working on 2 different projects, and they collaborate and stuff together. But most of their builds lately have just been the 2 of them doing their stuff individually. So you've got a bunch of introverts getting together, but we all love it. That's a reason why everybody goes to those after parties, after those events, or you do the Houston woodworking show, let's say, and everybody's like, oh, are you going to dinner? Let's do dinner. Just going out and hanging out. Because another thing is you get to listen to other people's conversations about them talking about something that you enjoy, or maybe something that's just, you don't, I've never done metalworking. Well, this episode is about metalworking. No, let me hear about it. Maybe that'll pique my interest into that. And that's a conversation that you're listening to or you're part of that your wife or your spouse doesn't want to be part of. Because all of us probably, our wives are tired of hearing about, what you made in the shop that day,
Certainly. I lived that one.
Yeah. But sure.
But no, back to what you guys were talking about, not to keep going down the Instagram path, but I'm back to the old forum days where you would post pictures and like a build thing. That's when Instructables came in. And if you guys know Instructables, like I was really hot on that when I had the time and did my own style of stuff rather than getting sucked into this Instagram 10 to 13 second window every single day and reels, and it's got to be trending audio. But like that's what I enjoyed. And I'll say even Matt, you've probably followed along, but on the Bessie ceiling rack, like I stretched that thing out, but I did 10 to 13 seconds, but I did start to finish every single day and bombed. I mean, it just, like nobody cared. They just wanted to see that finish. And it's like, no, this took 2.5 weeks out of my life of just thought process. Yeah. I even shared like the fails of it, but no one cares. No one wants to see that. No one wants to understand the thought process, the engineering behind it, like what you had to overcome to get this to work. And they just want to finish beautiful project. And
well, Dean, you've probably seen this on your Making Our Way podcast, that those episodes continue to pick up new views or new listens as you go along. And if you're doing something right, the episode count keeps going up week to week. Right? Like when I first started, I was like, ooh, I made 100, 100 listens. That's awesome. And, now approaching 400 and 500 downloads or plays. And there's a consistent trend to it, which means that you're doing something right, I think. Whereas if you post something on Instagram, it could be your best work. Or if you post something on YouTube, it could be your best work. And it probably is going to bomb. Or
it could be you shredding paper and it's the most viewed video you have.
Yeah, exactly. There's a sense of comfort, I think, too, that you get doing something like this, because you're like, okay, people are finding value. You pick up Patreon members. That means that, okay, those people are finding value in it. And then now you're having conversations with those people, and they're now feeding into your content. So like we have a Discord channel for the Patreon members, and it's great to get their feedback on the episodes, because when somebody listens to an episode, if they're not a Patreon member, if they're not part of the chat, they play it and they move on to the next podcast, right? And then next week you post another one, they listen to it, and they move on to the next podcast. You don't ever get that feedback. You don't get the like, you don't get the comment. hopefully somebody leaves a review of the episode or the podcast. That's the goal. But, often they don't. I'm guilty of other podcasts that I listen to not leaving a review. And, but it means the world to the people who are doing the podcasts, because it helps them understand how to better cater that content.
I was going to ask you, what is your why? Is the why are you doing this podcast? Is it, another avenue to feed into your empire? Is it something you get that's self-fulfilling? What is the true why that why do you book the next episode?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the initial thought was like gathering makers together to talk about their craft, right? And that's still part of the intro is, sitting around talking shop with each other. It's finding out ways that you do something, or maybe there's something that you do, like, Trey's got into fiber lasers lately, right? And that's interesting to me. So let's talk about fiber lasers. And then I can, it's me having a one-on-one conversation or a 2 or 3-on-1 kind of conversation, just learning about something that I have no idea about. That it's things that pique my curiosity. And so for me, selfishly, it was a way for me to have an avenue to just ask a bunch of people a bunch of different questions. And so that was the initial reason why to do this. And then as I got into the episodes, I started to go like, okay, yeah, it is fulfilling the why, and hearing about people's stories too. It's reassuring because these are things that people don't share often, in a YouTube video. It doesn't play well in the YouTube arena.
Sure.
And so you can have a conversation with somebody and they're like, yeah, man, I'm really struggling with this. Or, it's real conversations. It's not phony conversations. People really pour their heart out in podcasts.
So what is your interview process, or how do you select people to find out other than you talked about finding people intriguing and want to bring those on? How do you go about that?
Yeah.
Because not everybody is going to be podcast worthy. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. So actually, it's a great question, because when I'm getting ready to have a guest on, I had asked a couple people, hey, do you want to be on the podcast or whatever? And then I'll see or hear them on something else, and I'm like, oh, it's a really dry conversation, right? So I'm geared up for that conversation, knowing, okay, this one might be a little bit more dry, or they've not done this before. So, what can I do to kind of pull that out of them? And so right now, kind of my approach is, if I ask somebody, now there are people who have asked me to be on the podcast, and I kind of go through a vetting process for that. So I've got somebody, I've never talked to this person.
Have you raised your rates? You charged me $500.
You're not supposed to tell people how much I charged you.
Oh, okay.
I charged you $500 for you to be on the podcast.
Right. You said it was an exposure, that you had this huge account,
yeah.
and I was going to get all these new followers.
Yeah. Did that happen?
No, of course not.
Well, he told me I was going to get a Surf Prep sander. That's why I wore the shirt. I mean,
yeah. So there's a guy. So YouTube is a great place for me to get inspiration, because I can see their personality, unless it's just like a no face channel. But Nick Sawyer from Sawyer Design Furniture, I just picked up his channel. I started watching some of his stuff, and I was like, this dude, like, he does some complex stuff on his channel. So after binge watching, probably 5 or 6 different of his videos, I was like, I think people really enjoy hearing about how he comes up with his builds and stuff like that. So I reached out to him. So sometimes it's like that. And so we're scheduling, actually today I was talking to him, we're trying to schedule that recording. But then, sometimes it's just having a conversation with somebody, and they're like, man, I've been really enjoying your podcast. And I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought about it. I should probably have this person on. So that's kind of the select. There's no like hard fast rule, but obviously it's a talking medium, so I want the person to be able to talk. And lately I've been telling people when we're kind of warming up, I'll tell them, if you're talking 90% of the time, it's going to be a great episode, because they're here to hear you, right? Now, Dean, your thoughts, I think, are probably a little bit maybe different, because when we first started the podcast, you were like, people are going to come back to hear Matt, right?
Yeah, so that's an interesting part. I just got done, I don't know, 30 minutes ago saying you don't want to make it the Matt show. You're here to interview guests. But that's why we do segments, so that we try to give something. I think about like the Howard Stern show. People come to listen to Howard Stern, not who the guests are. So if you want a repeatable audience, you need to relate it to, hey, this is Matt, and these are his format and his dad jokes, and this is what you get out of it. And that's what brings people back, in my opinion. But we're interviewing you. I know we talked about growth and things like that. I know that was a growing pain I had to go through, is to talk less, let the guests talk. Yeah. It's interesting to hear how you pick guests, because I don't pick any guest. I may occasionally tell Christy, hey, what about this guy? But Christy books all the guests, and it's so nice to share those burdens. I can't imagine having to do everything. You're doing the editing, you're lining up the guests, you're setting up the schedule. You do all kind of neat. Why don't you go into what made you decide to do all the Sizzler reels and like all the, pre-videos? You do an amazing job of advertising the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. So as a new podcast, it's difficult because nobody knows you exist. And I thought, how can I get my podcast out there? I thought, well, I've got an audience on Instagram. Let me try it on there. So I tried posting on my Voltner Woodworking Instagram page. Anytime I posted those on my Voltner Woodworking one, they bombed. And so
really,
so then I started putting it on the Maker Lounge podcast Instagram and inviting people as a collaborator. And I always tell the guest, hey, I'm gonna put you as a collaborator. You're under no obligation to accept, right? So most people are doing at least one of the. I might do 3 or 4 or sometimes 7, depending on if there's a lot of great content or if I have time. Really, is what it comes down to. And so I was like, well, this is a great way for me to get that out there. And as I started doing that, I realized, okay, this is going on somebody else's page. I've really got to make sure that it can stand on its own, right? Because this may be my first introduction to their audience, and I want it to be a good one. So that's why I try to like cherry pick some of the clips from the episodes without giving too much of the episode away.
Those alone have come so far, especially with the the profile picture and everything you've done on that. Like they have that alone has just climbed tremendously.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would tell anybody, if you don't pay for the pro version of Canva, and this is not sponsored by Canva, but if you don't pay for the pro version of Canva, it's a great way for you to get some great looking graphics for a very low cost of entry. And so that's what I start doing with my thumbnails, and sometimes I'll put that as the picture for a specific reel, so that way it's not a picture of them with their eyes shut or something like that, and I don't remember how much it costs, maybe $10-$12, something like that. It's so worth it. Initially the podcast was not making any money. It was costing me quite a bit of money, because I pay for the Adobe suite. I was paying for Canva. I was paying for Riverside, which we're recording on, paying for the web. Well, I didn't have a website at first, but once I started getting some Patreon members, I was like, okay, now the podcast is paying for itself, and I'm not making money on it. Every dollar right now is going into basically the streaming service or things like that. Now I have brought on, of course, Surf Prep as a sponsor, and that has helped me. Now I have a website, better microphone, things like that, like stickers and swag and giveaways and stuff like that. So right now, every dollar is going back into the episodes just to make them a little bit better.
That's amazing. It's amazing that it's self-sustaining at this point. Only 20 episodes in, so high five, virtual high five to you.
I'll take it. Where's the camera? Yeah.
So I think we've reached this up to. Let's talk about the future. I mean, how do you want to see it grow?
Yeah. I want to continue having on guests who are just starting, their hobby, woodworking or metalworking or whatever type of making that they're doing. I want to have those guests on still because those are relatable conversations. And so I don't want to deviate from that. Of course, having people on like Jimmy and Izzy and Chris and Derek and Jason and, just tons of well-known people, it kind of sets a bar, right? And so that's the challenge is I want to continue doing those conversations, but I also don't want to be unrelatable. When you listen to those people, though, they are so relatable. They're you and me, and they have numbers behind them, right? And so that's another great thing about the podcast is you get to pick up on all that kind of stuff. So kind of like for the future of the podcast, I want to continue doing that type of stuff, but I also am seriously considering bringing on somebody. So I've talked with Joseph from Joe Jacks. He may become a sponsor of the podcast and help out with some of the technical stuff. And so we're having those conversations now. So I'm looking forward to that potential because it takes a long time. Like just getting the audio right. You've got somebody who has a microphone that is they're talking through their iPhone cords and it's really tinny or whatever. And me as a listener of other podcasts, if the audio is not balanced, it gets me to just instantly tune out, skip to the next. Is the guest worth it? And sometimes I don't even know if that guest is worth it on other podcasts because I've already tuned them out. There's already a barrier there. And so I think high quality audio, video, if you're going to post it on YouTube or whatever, that's important. So I am talking to him about doing some of that. So hopefully we can make that happen.
Let's venturing into future. Is there anything that you have done that you will not absolutely do again in future episodes?
Oh man, I wasn't expecting this one. So I'm trying to do I'm trying to do better at vetting out guests, like we kind of talked about before. If there's somebody who they're a great person and they do great stuff, but they may not be a great fit for an audio medium, then I have to just tell myself that I have to tell them no. Like it, I love you, but I don't think this is going to work, right? But I hate doing that. So at some, do you put the episode out? Do you cut the episode short?
You have mysterious technical difficulties and you lost the recording.
There have been quite a few technical difficulties with this, just over the 20 different episodes. Like when we first came on, we had this happen.
Did we lose you?
You're gonna have to start over, Matt.
Yeah, well, Matt's audio. I'll go ahead and say.
Do you remember that, Dean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Trey, I know we're just barely familiar with each other, but you'll know exactly where you stand with me. I don't.
Yeah.
And I respect that more than you can imagine, to be honest with you.
I'm going to keep the Foley in there. I think it's fun to keep.
That's
to keep the bells and all that kind of stuff in there. That's just. And so here's the other thing. I was talking to somebody about YouTube, and I was like, why are my YouTube videos just not getting views, right? And they said, well, you do great on like the intros for the podcasts. So just do that for your YouTube. So I'm like going through this like internal struggle. How do I, because if you think about the various platforms, Instagram is one way. YouTube is a totally different platform. Podcast is a totally different platform. How do I show people my personality on YouTube? And kind of do.
Are you talking about these videos? The podcast videos?
People say that. No. On my Vault in the Woodworking.
Okay, you're talking about okay.
So I'm like, how do I do that? But yeah, I don't know. So bikinis, yep. TikTok videos.
It's got to happen. I mean, it just has to happen.
You're experiencing the evolution of Matt. I think I'm starting to find my groove on the podcast, I think. And I was listening back, kind of preparing myself for this podcast episode, and I was listening back to some of those earlier episodes, and I was like, oh, these are so cringe. Like, I can't believe people listen to me, Well,
it wasn't just you. I mean, as well as like, I won't name any names, but there's a few that they just kind of like you said, they just don't work out on a podcast situation. Great people, love them, speak to them often. It's just they just don't make podcast people. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it has nothing to do with them.
They're not as great as you guys.
Keeping the ball rolling.
The other thing is, even though we can see each other, you lose that body language to let you know. And so when you get especially more than three people, when to come in, when is it okay to talk, and that leads to those awkward pauses that as a listener can, they're not engaging like we are right here. And so those awkward pauses make the podcast feel dry. And that's difficult. It's an interesting dance, and you have to learn the moves for sure.
But just like you were saying, like, it's hard to overtalk somebody that you don't know, or you don't want to be rude to. Like, Dean, you and I, we don't talk on a normal basis. I don't want to be rude to you, but so then
go ahead and be rude.
It's shy away from jumping in. But no, it's the truth. I mean, but we're both adults. We're all adults. We're not trying to be rude by it. But yes, I agree. We see each other. We're talking.
He obviously doesn't know you, Dean. He said we're all adults.
I was going to say, what's been real hard is talking to Matt when I want to talk to you about the arcade games that you build and that kind of stuff. And I know everything there is to know about Matt.
We got to interview this bearded guy.
Right, yeah.
Well, we could go into the next episode and talk to Trey about arcade games.
Well, look, on my podcast, we do a thing called This or That, where we give the guest some options to see which way they would go. And I've got a This or That for you. You came out the gate with a strong theme song and a strong logo. But if you had to move on from one of those and develop a version 2, do you think you would change the logo or the theme song?
That's great. I actually did change the logo. And then I think I sent it to you, Trey, maybe, and showed you a couple different versions of it.
Oh, the microphone's gone.
What? Oh,
was it the microphone and then it changed to the saw beard?
So I have two different stickers, actually. The main logo is this one. And so for those of you listening, it's basically got my glasses and headphones, and then like instead of the beard, it's like a quarter of a saw blade. And then it says Maker Lounge Podcast on one side. Then I was like, I don't know if I like this. I kind of started to steer a different direction. So I came up with this alternate logo, which it has a microphone in the center. And so I tried this out on a few different people, and they're like, that looks like every podcast logo out there.
Yeah, that's nowhere near as good.
So I had the stickers made. So I'll be giving those away at Workbench Con.
Version 1 is so much better.
So I'm like, you know what? Stick to yourself. Stick to your own, unique identity. It's kind of a blend between my Voltner Woodworking logo. In fact, so I had paid a graphic designer to do basically everything that I kept on this was the glasses and a quarter of the saw blade from my. So this is a blend of my two different logos that I had a designer do, and then I did all the rest of this to kind of make it unique. So I wanted people to be able to see this and have a visual association with me. And so I was like, okay, I think I'll just stick with that.
And so to answer the question, would you stick with the logo?
I'm trying to avoid the question. Next question, please. No,
right.
so yeah, to answer the question, I would have stuck with the original logo and not spent the probably 20 hours I had invested in coming up with a different logo. And the intro song, I think, is fantastic. I came across it, subscribed to actually 3 different music services where I can get music from, which is overkill. I understand, but that's me. And I found that one, and I was like, this is kind of cool. But I don't know if it is me, like it's a great song. But I don't know if it mirrors what the actual lounge feel that I was initially going for. So to answer the question, the song.
I like that answer. I think you hit it on the head. I think it's a great song. I like it every time it comes on, but it's not loungy for sure.
Yeah. I picked it because it was different, and I wanted, like I've been saying, I wanted the podcast to be different, and it was a unique kind of flair. But then we kicked off the episodes, and it was like, it doesn't really match. But then it became the song. So,
but it works. It's like everybody said, it's not bad. It doesn't deter. It doesn't take away from anything. It just, I respect your answer, but I wouldn't tell you to change it by any means. But and I like the original logo too. So.
Thank you. 20 hours down the tubes.
It's on my wall. So.
That's right. Yeah, you got one of the first banners. So the future of the podcast, we'll leave that to the Patreon members. But if you are, as somebody else called them, freeloaders, and that stuck with me. I'm a freeloader of a lot of podcasts.
Non-patrons, y'all call freeloaders.
I'm a freeloader of I'm a freeloader of the Making Our Way podcast.
I'm a freeloader of this podcast, and I've been on 4 episodes now.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great exclusive content that other podcasts put out. I'm a patron of a couple different podcasts. They do, different hangouts and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I think I'm gonna save that for the after show.
I would be a patron. I'm just waiting for the content to get better.
Oh, burn.
Check back with me in about 20 episodes.
Yeah.
No, man, they've been great. Everyone's
drops off.
Yeah, everyone's been getting better and better. I was kind of curious what went on in the Patreon, so maybe I do need to pay up so I can no longer be a freeloader.
All right. So speaking of things that I have changed since the last few episodes, is I had some nice advice from somebody who said, hey, you should probably just have their Instagram and social media handles ready, and you just say them out instead of like just saying, okay, tell people where they can find you. So that's one thing that I've started doing, is just like, okay, they can find you here and they can find you there. Cool. Because it is the wrap up portion of the episode. And so, people can tell when it's the end of the episode, just like a YouTube video. And so one thing I'm going to try to get better at is bringing the listener all the way to the end and trying to wrap up as fast as I can the episode. I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, but so I'm not there yet, and I don't see the retention graphs. So Trey, they can find you at handcrafted_by_Trey on Instagram, and they can find you on YouTube, Handcrafted by Trey. Same. Awesome. Same. And Dean, you are Dean_Duplantis, DUPLAN. Well, I'll put it in the show notes.
That works.
Yeah. So you're there, and you're also on YouTube. You doing any YouTube content?
Soon.
Yeah. Good. I look forward to seeing that. And you
Speeding up the outro. He's doing much better.
And you can follow me at Voltner Woodworking on Instagram and YouTube. And I tell people don't follow me on TikTok because it's just reposts of my Instagram content. Follow the Maker Lounge podcast on Instagram and YouTube as well. And leave a review for the podcast. If you want to get in on the after show that we do, head over to patreon.com/Maker Lounge podcast. And huge thanks to Surf Prep for sponsoring today's episode. Again, surfprepsanding.com. Use the code MAKERLOUNGE, all one word, for 10% off your sanders and abrasives, anything on their store. So thank you to the Patreon members. We have a number of Rockstar patrons. We've got Jimmy McAnally. We've got Matthew with Artigiano Serio, Victor with Wimm Design, Justin with Calvary Customs LLC, and Brent Jarvis with CleanCut Woodworking. So join the Rockstar patron level. That is the top level, and there's only a number of slots available. So head over to patreon.com/Maker Lounge podcast and check that out. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Thanks.
Done.